To be honest, I don't remember much after that. I think I was loaded into a car, and then I think there was a lot of shaking. My consciousness came back because I felt a familiar sense of cold on my skin, one that seemed to want to wring me dry. My body was still heavy, and my consciousness felt like mud. My life instincts seemed to shout, "This place is bad." When I came to, I was in front of that house. The middle-aged man was carrying me on his back, climbing up the stairs to the second floor. No, I don't want to come here anymore. I wanted to shout, but in reality I couldn't even move my fingertips. Not caring for my will, I was carried forth by the middle-aged man and stood in front of the entrance to that house alongside Krishna and the white-clothed woman. Krishna easily opened the door. I thought I locked the door, but it opened without a key. Inside glowed an ethereal light. "Who?" said Krishna sharply. I forced shut my restrained eyelids. "No, I don't want to see. I didn't care who was inside. I didn't want to deal with it anymore. I give up." I decided right there and then. If I were able to wake up safely tomorrow, I would go straight back home to Shizuoka. In the end, it was impossible for me to live alone in the demonic city Tokyo. I wanted to turn around the fortunes of my family business, and came to Tokyo to study for it, but I'm too much of a wuss to live alone. I'm better off living in a rural area surrounded by family and friends. My father and sister who opposed my decision were right after all. Mother supported me, but I felt apologetic toward her. But I tried my best, but these happenings, I couldn't expect them, and I could do nothing. "Come inside and close the door," someone said from inside the house. I recognized that voice, cold, clear, but somehow decisive. If you want to know what's to happen, then you should do that. Right, this voice. "Yoichi," my whisper echoed through the silence. "Yoichi?" Yoishi's lackadaisical voice saying, "Good evening," overlapped Krishna's incredulous voice. There was a spare key near the sewer entrance below, so I used that to come in. "Let's go in." At Krishna's voice, the middle-aged man entered the foyer while carrying me, and then he took off his shoes and continued to the living quarters. Krishna and the white-clothed woman followed behind. When I looked past the middle-aged man's shoulder, I saw Yoichi already sitting in the middle of the empty living quarters with a candle inside an empty can. Dim light came from that. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" Krishna sounded as if she was scolding, but Yoichi answered lackadaisically again. "Quiet. If you brought that person here, then you two already understand what's going on in this house." "Yoichi, I see," Krishna groaned. "You're Yoichi. You're the child posting on Ikai Gapuchi." Yoichi continued her silence, but Krishna clicked her tongue and continued. "I have no problem with you having interest in the occult. Having interest in actually tiptoeing the edge is different. You should realize that you're playing in a hazy boundary." "No worries," Yoichi flatly responded to Krishna's harsh tone. "I have confidence only in that conviction." Wow, she's undeterred by this angry Krishna. This is why girls are scary. My big sis was scary too, and when mother snapped, she was scarier than father. However, Krishna sounded a bit lonely. I know. I've seen children like you before. That's why I say it. People who harbor expectations from the depth of the darkness. They always drag humans into the darkness, too, even if they don't mean to. That's extremely dangerous. The middle-aged man slowly let me down from his shoulder and laid me to the wall, by the wall, in a sitting posture, and I had nothing to do but listen to their conversation. My powerless body felt like it was being dragged about, and I could only feel an endless sense of helplessness. What happened here, what's happening here, and what's about to happen here. Everything was off the rail my life had been following. I could do nothing here. All I could do was listen to the creepy conversation and be an observer to a creepy act. However, more than the desire to learn the truth, my desire to run away was stronger. As soon as possible, I wanted to go out into a bright place. Krishna. Just then the monk stepped in between the two. It started. Along with his words, that sound began. From somewhere in the building, that sound echoed. Must be 2 a.m., huh? Scratch, 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 scratch. As if overpowering everything, only that sound echoed. Scratch, 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 scratch. Something was grinding together. Something was carving together. That sound was the loudest I'd heard. It was almost as if something was trying to crush this place from outside. I frantically looked around. I was completely in tears, and only the creepy sound filled the world. Please, stop. Forgive me. As I started tearfully screaming, Yoichi said, "Wonderful." Her happy voice entered my ears, and I became enraged. Wonderful? Are you seriously insane? It's beyond sanity to sneak into a house with a ghost milling about, using a single... That's voices in the music. Neat. Single candle and just sit there. Ah, I get it. You're that. You're like a friend of ghosts. Great. Can you tell your friend to stop scaring me? I'm sorry for barging in on your house, but I didn't know. Cleaned up after myself and left, so stop bothering me and go away. I mean, tell the friend to stop following me to my new place and giving me a countdown. I don't know what sort of grudge they have against the world, but I'm completely unrelated, so stop. Tell them. Of course, my body wouldn't move and neither would my mouth, but I begged Yoichi with all my all. However, Yoichi didn't understand my feelings at all. Hey, scared? I heard an inexplicable, hopeful voice in my ear. It seemed Yoichi had come right next to me, but I couldn't open my eyes, so I screamed at her with my soul. Of course I'm scared. I'm super scared. My body won't move and I don't get it, and some sound is echoing through my head and only psychos and ghosts are around me. Right. This house only has psychos now. A psychotic administrator that gathers and edits creepy articles. A psychotic woman holding some bizarre weapon despite being of age. Hey man, I didn't get to read that. You hold up. Where is it? Psychotic woman holding some bizarre weapon despite being of age. Some psychotic baldy who seems to only have muscle building as a hobby. And you, a covered in black straight frontal hair psychotic girl. There's some douche ghost that never shows itself but does annoying pranks. Like carve numbers. Seriously, cut that shit out. Are you all just enjoying your emergency offline meeting right now? You're all just waiting for me to pee my pants, aren't you? Hey, come on, cut it out. I was wrong. I didn't get to finish that. Thanks. You want to give me a goddamn second? Christ. Where was I? Cut it out, I was wrong. I don't want it to be here anymore. I don't want to see those numbers anymore. Next is 1. Then what? What's next? I don't want to know. I mean, if you're gonna kill me, just do it. Stop cornering me and shit. However, at some point the sound had stopped. My dark world, with my tightly shut eyes, had become filled with silence. What? What happened? I became worried that everyone had left, but I was also afraid that if I were to open my eyes, something would be there. Still, I couldn't just stay like this. I was tired. I'd begun to feel reckless. If you're gonna kill me, kill me. I don't want to get cornered and hunted like this. Just give me a bad end already. I opened my tearful eyes, but I just saw a house, unchanged from before. And everyone was there. Krishna stood in front of the door to the bedroom. The white-clothed woman stood in the middle of the living room with her eyes closed. The monk lingered by my side, and only Yoichi was looking at me with no emotion. Everyone was standing at the same spot they were before I closed my eyes. I gazed with my teary eyes at Yoishi's eyes, and then she nodded. And then she looked down. I followed her sight, to my feet. As if cutting across the space between my feet, a thick wound had been carved into the floor. "Ooh," I screamed and pulled my sluggish body away. My hip wouldn't respond, and so all I could do was flail in place. However, I tried to scramble away anyways. You know what's coming. It was 1. The end. I'm tired of this. I want to go home. I want to go back to Shizuoka. Calm down, Nagi, said Krishna. At some point she started calling me Nagi, but I didn't care as I tried to crawl away. I was too busy trying to flee from the number. No. What's the point of staying here? What's going to happen next? What's going to happen to me? Get a grip, Nagi. Krishna sounded again. God damn it, it must be the monk. Some heavy impact struck my back. After that, the white-clothed woman said something I couldn't understand. It was filled with strange rhymes I'd never heard before. Countless words that made me head go insane. Yeah, great, thanks for the typo. It really takes out the story. But then I frantically flailed about. A long black skirt blocked my way. It was Yoichi, dressed in obsidian as always. Move, I said with a trembling voice, but this time it was not glass beads, it was not glimmering, but rather, this time Yoichi had a fascinated look as she reached out with her hand. Give me that. That? What you're holding. That, she said, and I looked at what I held in my hands. There was the key to the apartment. It was a key I'd left in my pocket. I was holding it backwards, and on the end of it was wood. For a while I didn't know what it meant. And then the wood fell off onto the one that had been cut ominously at my feet. What? No way. No way. That... Yes, Yoichi said in a whisper. The one that was carving numbers into this house was always you. With those words, my consciousness was filled with white. In other words, it was a schema. It was an evening, roughly 5 days later. Krishna was talking to me in a B club room at the university. Or rather, a reverse schema. That house makes people uneasy. Krishna and I were facing each other in the room, under the light from a pretty dawn. The house makes people uneasy? I repeated like a fool, and Krishna nodded. In the past, Ikai Gambuchi investigated similar places too. Structure of the building causes changes in the human psyche toward anxiety. There are actually a number of them around the world. Some of them turn into murder scenes, and others turn the people within into criminals. There's no actual scientific proof for the relation, but I'm of the opinion that they exist. People's minds, after all, are hazy things that you can easily manipulate into leaning one way or another. But wait a second. What exactly do you mean? Basically, the building wasn't built for people. I felt something like a cold hand gripping my heart. I'll avoid saying the name here, but the architect of that building had actually received architecture awards during his time in university. People had high expectations of him. Krishna was illuminated by the golden sunlight, and her straight black hair glittered as she spoke in remembrance. He was supposedly a very serious person, maybe too serious. He was the type of person that wondered what buildings are, and he would lose sleep pondering that. He loved the joyful faces of the landlords so much, and worked and worked. However, he realized the futility that arose when one person asked him for another design, as he saw the house he'd put blood and soul into to be demolished in the name of renovation. Families changed, preferences changed. It's unavoidable as long as you're living, but he couldn't take it. If you take care of it while living, it would last over 100 years. Sometimes people should suit themselves to the house. He left those words and is said to have vanished from his atelier one day. His family put out a search request, but no one could ever find him. Some years later, he was effectively declared dead. That was over 30 years ago. That atelier was his final work, and had at some point been dubbed the house that grants wishes. Krishna pointed out the third-floor window toward the residential district. This country tossed aside countless traditions along with its Meiji agricultural revolution. I'm of the opinion that one of those traditions was the house. Tiled roofs became scarcer with the years, and buildings that housed several generations became rarer. Mass production, mass consumption, that was the era we'd entered. We weren't inheriting treasures anymore, believing instead that you would reset life every few decades. It could reset. After all, that sufficed for supply and demand. But I think things that were important to the people of this country faded away more and more. After I heard her words, I thought, my father was saying the same. It takes 30 years to grow a single sturdy tree, and yet the Japanese lumber industry found itself in danger of going out of business in the face of cheap lumber being imported. It wasn't that he was worried over his job. He was afraid that the idea that you could get an unlimited amount of cheap wood would become ingrained in the minds of the people of this country. In the past, people would pray to the gods of the forest, would cut trees while offering thanks, carefully build houses with them. Whenever they were rebuilding, they carefully tried to reuse wood whenever possible. Even on this earthquake-riddled island, Horyuji had remained standing for 1,000 years. Skilled carpenters who understood the finest details and characteristics of wood in the day were, of course, amazing, but they also say that the graciousness toward the important offerings of nature was just as important. I always agonized over having been born into a family whose business dealt with lumber. Did I take care of buildings as I grew up? Did I ever think about the feelings of those who created the building? I was filled with emotions that I wondered if a day would ever arrive that his wish would come true, within this grand city where every day you could see the sights of reform or reconstruction. According to Krishna, everything originated from the design of that house, which contained the intent of the architect. When an architectural friend of Krishna took a look, they noted that, while it looked simple, it used extremely high-level techniques. They said that the groaning of the house was to give it durability against hurricanes and earthquakes, along with a bit of playfulness to deliberately make it groan. The meaningful space under the stair is the center point of a sturdily built house. The kitchen, which gets abused the most, was deliberately omitted. The living quarters were deliberately designed to interfere with daily routine. It was certainly a house constructed for durability. Krishna mumbled as she pushed her red-framed glasses up. Normally, houses should revolve around the inhabitants, but not in this case. People naturally begin to feel like the house was built for something other than themselves, and that was enough to psychologically rattle people. So what happens when a boy who just recently come to Tokyo, who has no friends, decides to live there? So in other words, it had nothing to do with ghosts? Indeed, you're much more mentally fatigued than you probably realized, having moved to a city alone. You may have felt fear at first, but you probably tolerated it. But eventually you reach a limit, and then, what do people do? Krishna looked at me with her big eyes. They create a reason for escaping from fear. Creating a reason? Yes, they create a reason for the sounds. In other words, you were subconsciously carving numbers into the walls of the house at night. But I was speechless. Krishna leaned closer. Think about it, Nagi. Where does fear come from? It comes from the unknown. That's why people learn. They research inexplicable things to escape from fear. People's knowledge was born from effort devoted to escaping from fear. Cooking developed out of the fear of starvation. Clothing developed out of fear of external temperature, and buildings and weapons developed out of fear of enemies. Everything began from human fears. You thought there was an inexplicable sound at night? However, no matter how much you searched the house, you couldn't find a reason for the sound. Of course, you'd have to know that the house was deliberately designed to make sounds, but you had no way of knowing. Then what do? You were concerned, so you created a reason for the sounds. In other words, a reverse schema. Is that even possible? No, it had to be. Otherwise, how would the number 4 have been carved into the back of a shoe I'd been wearing all along? I was wearing it, so it had to have been me. My lower body was trembling. It terrified me, the other self that acted irrespective of my will, or rather, that I didn't understand myself. Well, Krishna sat back down and sighed. It's partly my fault for leaving a building like that alone, even though I knew it existed right near me. Sorry, she said as she bowed her head, which flustered me. No, stop that. It all started with me being greedy, because I wanted to skimp on living expenses and didn't immediately move out. Please, raise your head, I frantically said. It was your fault, she nodded. There are no shortcuts for granting wishes. I could give no retort and just groaned. However, really there was one question that hadn't been answered. Wait, then why were the numbers counting down? Krishna shook her head, saying, Who knows? Huh? You don't know? I asked. For some reason her eyes glimmered with amusement. I don't know, but I think you probably carved a cross on the wall. A cross? Not... Bleh. Right, the number 10. It's possible that it might not have been meant to be a number to begin with. Probably didn't matter to you. Your fear was alleviated by carving anything into the wall to act as the source of the sounds. However, this is why this incident came forth. A little bit of coincidence on the place you carved. There was from the start, out of pure coincidence, a scratch. Subconsciously, you remembered where you carved bleh. Yet, when you woke up, it combined with the original scratch to create bleh. And that was what gave birth to something else inside you. A ghost. Ah. So that's why I felt an incredible amount of anxiety when I first saw that number. The feeling of having encountered something far beyond my threshold that I could not reason out. After that, you continued carving letters into the wall in accordance to the sound you heard after sleeping. The countdown was probably because of your subconscious desire. The numbers went up, continued forever, probably hoping that it would eventually stop. After that, Krishna had a bit of a mischievous look. But you're quite simple. The countdown ended. May have ended your life. Glad we made it on time. And with that, she showed me a soft smile for the first time. Alright? If you've had enough of this, don't enter the world of ghosts out of curiosity. As with living people, pay respect to all existences. That's the main motto of Ikai Gabuchi, after all. The Krishna who said that, with complete seriousness, matched the imagine. I'd have of Krishna the person. Although, she had a more moe character appearance than a big brother or father. And with that, the complex, tangled thread had been solved. According to Krishna, she'd realized that the building caused anxiety in the psyche of its inhabitants the moment I made my first post. In an effort to keep it under wraps, she had left it in Kadasu's hand. But Kadasu was pretty careless to begin with and then became drunk, so the important message had not gone across to me, which is why things had escalated to this point. In any case, everything was solved, so that was good. Give you a warning though. As I was leaving the house, Krishna had told me, You don't seem to have much tolerance for this area. Maybe I shouldn't be saying it as administrator for an occult site, but you shouldn't delve into the occult genre too much. Find friends in Tokyo with whom you can bond. Get a girlfriend. Construct and pay a proper, solid identity while you dabble in the occult as a hobby. That's the right way to do it. Especially, avoid that girl named Yoichi. Which sounded about right. As Krishna said, Yoichi was abnormal. She was, to put it frankly, like her feet were planted firmly on the other side. That was probably why those urban legends popped up over her odd level of concentration on the paranormal. The sunset was extremely beautiful as I stepped out of the west wing. The clear orange color shone straight to my soul. Dang. I've become easily moved by this incident, and almost came to tears just out of graciousness towards peacefulness. I hung on, willing myself to cry against crying. There were a lot of students about, and a feeder high school was just on the other side of the gate to the west wing. There were a number of high school girls going home too. I didn't want to embarrass myself as a university student. But then, I realized one of them was staring at me. Her black hair was pretty. She had white skin and was slender. Her uniform figure was blinding. Just by standing, she looked like she was from a different world. Wait, what? I eventually realized that I recognized that girl. Couldn't have restrained myself from running to her. Wait, Yoichi. Then girl turned her glass bead eyes to me. Oh, you. Her sleepy response made me realize she wasn't looking at me. Maybe she was wearing a school uniform. Perhaps as a thought of her look stood out. Even in such an appearance, she seemed distant from daily life. Hey, what a coincidence. You attend our feeder school. So what year are you? I spoke to her with a full smile. That has nothing to do with you. Yoichi's response was quite cold. There was none of her bedazzlement, vitality-filled look anymore that she had when looking up upon the paranormal. I hadn't come to school in a while. I shouldn't have come at all, she said with annoyance, and I noticed she didn't have the sharp smell from before. It seemed she'd taken a bath. Glossy hair, ironed white blouse, black tie. I narrowed my eyes as I gazed in contrast from before and said, "Pretty good." "What is?" "Your looks. You look more clean. Uniform suits you." However, Yoichi turned it back to me, saying I was pathetic. I intended to praise her, but it apparently just annoys her. If it's nothing, I'm going." She turned on her heel. I hurriedly stopped her. "You're staring over there. Do you want something from Krishna?" Krishna. She seemed to react to that word, as life seemed to return to her glass beads. "I see. Ikai Gabuchi's here." Her response to the occult was pretty good. I felt like I was being driven mad as I continued talking in that direction. I'm indebted to you a bit, too. I heard all about that house. I didn't know there were things like subconscious confusion over a building. Man, I freaked out a bit when I learned the truth. I was probably on a high from having been released from my fears. I kept talking. I talked on and on. Everything I had heard from Krishna. The truth about the incident. About the architecture of the house. About the will of the architect, and even about the problems of contemporary Japan. However, Yoichi didn't react at all. Without even glancing at me, she said, "That's good." I continued walking without any trace of emotion. That made me feel a bit lonely, so I chased after her, bothered by her body language. "What is it? You seem pretty depressed. Is there anything else on your mind?" When I said that, I remembered. Come to think of it, that day, she said at that house, "Have you noticed?" Right. What did she notice at that time? I asked her and she stopped. Then she slowly turned around and asked back. "Do you really want to hear?" I felt like those black, cold eyes would swallow me. I heard something inside me, urging me to stop. Then I shouldn't learn anymore, it warned. "You can still turn back," said Yoichi. "You know what they say. If you peer from this side, they can see you too." Krishna had said that as well, and I felt goosebumps. But I wonder why. At a moment I had a bizarre sense of excitement, that I wanted to see the world as she viewed it, that I wanted to stand where she stood, that I wanted to know why her words always seemed to sway my world. Now listen, tell me. When I said that, was I seeing things, or did Yoichi seem to have a slightly forlorn look? However, I would realize later that this was a fork, a story about waiting in a bizarre and grotesque, helpless darkness of man. The boundary between that world and this world, the journey around the Ikaigabuchi, began this moment. After a moment, Yoichi nodded and began speaking. I was always wondering what it was called, the house that grants wishes. Why? Because that title lacks a subject. Whose wish? And those words gave me chills, and I immediately began regretting my decision. That house is a house of hope. I felt an incredible source of malice. Yoichi whispered with the expression of a queen who'd been locked away in a dark castle alone for 1,000 years. The architect that had disappeared while loving strange buildings, the countdown that began with bleh, the mysterious space under the stairs, the house that grants wishes, is a single answer that ties everything together. My goosebumps wouldn't go away. What was she trying to say? What was she about to show itself? The girl Yoichi's dark eyes glimmered as she spoke. The architect is still inside those stairs. Wait. Of course, he isn't alive, but then everything ties it together. Why there's a meaningless space under the stairs, why it became named the house that grants wishes, and why the numbers begin with bleh. Wait, it doesn't explain anything. It didn't start from bleh because it was originally bad. I had just coincidentally written it over wrong. Her words twisted my world. You originally wrote bleh. Right to that point. There was never a scratch to begin with. Someone added a scratch and changed it to bleh. Why? Why can you say that? I saw. What? Then on top of your bleh, someone had added a scratch to make it bleh. Then when Krishna said that there was no ghost in that house, and then Yoichi looked in the direction of the west wing with sadness. There's no better fortune than living with bliss. Huh. That is that person's kindness, and what I lack. I was going to go mad if I didn't laugh. You're lying, aren't you? You're making this all up, aren't you? Or it's that, an occult story you'd read somewhere. I laughed, praying that that was the case. Yoichi gave me a sympathizing look, a grieving look. Everything's the truth, because I could no longer respond, and Yoichi quietly landed the final blow. When you were carried out, some man I'd never seen before was clicking his tongue on the stairs. As the world spun around me, Yoichi's cold, sweet voice reverberated. Welcome to the world on this side. Okay, that was a thing. That was pretty alright. Apparently this is like a series of light novels. Apparently there's like translation effort that's on hiatus, I think. I briefly looked into this before I actually started this up, and I'm probably going to look into it after this because I'm curious where the story goes, if it goes anywhere after this. If the story continues, I don't know. But I'm definitely going to look into the light novels and see, like, hey, Is there anything more? What is this all about? But that was a nice, enjoyable, contained little story that didn't go too long. But damn, my throat hurts. I had to take many pauses during that to take a drink. Hopefully most of them were not noticeable because I purposely did it when there was no music or sound. So, yeah. Yeah, during the whole Krishna thing, where it's like, oh hey, it was just the schema, there was no ghost, I was like, yeah, but that doesn't explain why the main character still saw that ghost, and why Yoichi threw up at that place where the ghost was seen. So I'm glad that it was actually ghosts.